Since 2003, this is the Sports Source, East Tennessee's #1 sports talk show.
Brought to you by Junk Be Gone and the Garza Law Firm.
With your host, John Pennington. The Sports Source starts now.
Good Sunday morning. Welcome into the Sports Source. Happy to have you joining us here in the Paper Be Gone studios as we bring you another 90 minutes of packed Vol talk. We're going to talk football and recruiting. Tennessee all the way up to number 8 in the country in the recruiting rankings. How have they gotten there? Tennessee basketball adds a transfer, so they've got guys transferring out. First of the transfers in has committed, so we'll tell you about him a little later in the show. We'll also talk about a lot of older coaches. All of a sudden, now that NIL and the portal have come around, they seem to be retiring. Could that impact Rick Barnes' long-term plans? The fact that I've coached it one way for this long, now it's all changing. I could either reinvigorate a guy or, like, say, Jay Wright, tell him, time to go. We'll talk about that. We'll also have a live report from Gainesville with John Wilkerson, voice of Vols baseball. We'll preview the Tennessee-Florida game down there. Let's get into it. First segment of our program here today brought to you by the Garza Law Firm. And, folks, during supper time, I often catch a syndicated comedy or two, and I always see ads for the same attorneys. Yet you see no local locations in those ads. You see no local people in those ads. They aren't talking to local people who've been helped by those attorneys. And the reason is pretty simple. Those attorneys aren't local. They're in Birmingham, they're in Memphis, they're in Nashville. They want you to think they're local. They have one paralegal sitting in an office somewhere in town that's going to take your phone call. You know who is local? Marcos Garza. He's an East Tennessean. The Garza Law Firm is right here. From their ads to their years of history in our community, the Garza Law Firm. Check them out at garzalaw.com this week. Okay, let's welcome in the panel for today's show. We have from 99.1 The Sports Animal, Josh Ward. Josh, thank you for being here. Right there, Ryan Callahan from GoVols247.com. Ryan, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Vince Farrar from 99.1 The Sports Animal, thank you for joining us.
Always a pleasure.
And right down there, Chuck Cavaleris, longtime sports writer, longtime part of this panel. Chuck, thanks.
Great to be here, John.
All right. Josh Heupel had an exciting first year, gentlemen. Better than most anticipated, considering the absolute mess that he inherited on the field and certainly off the field, the roster he inherited. It was, by all accounts, a very successful first year. Follow that up, you got people talking about a top 25 finish this year. You got people talking about, well, okay, we'll beat Florida, we'll win at Pitt, and the flow started. People are starting to enjoy this thing. Now you look up, they're number 8 in the country, as I mentioned a second ago in recruiting, and we'll get to that a little later. Feels good. Everything, the momentum, it's bubbling up again. And I say again because we've been there before. Derek Dooley had some moments. You beat LSU, you beat North Carolina, they're jerked away by the officials, and you think, well, if not for those fluky calls, this guy's got a future. Butch Jones won 11 straight games at one point, beat Florida, beat Georgia, and all went to hell. Jeremy Pruitt, second longest win streak in the country right before he crashed the thing off a cliff. So my question for you to start this, there's so much momentum right now, but are you buying it this time? I bought into it once. Of those previous 3, I bought into it once. Are you buying into this? Does it feel different to you this time around? And if so, why or why not? Gentlemen? Anyone?
Boy, buying in, I mean, it just depends on what your definition of buying in is. Do I think that he's doing a nice job? Does it feel a little bit more foundational, so to speak, than maybe some of the previous? It does. Does that mean national championship and feeling like it's coming and promising it to our listeners and viewers? No, I'm not there.
But you do feel it's more tangible, more foundational is a good way of putting it.
I think so, but there's still some boxes to be checked. So it's not like I'm all the way there, but I do like what I've seen.
And you needed to grab some headlines, right? I mean, you didn't have a spring game. And we understand why, because of renovations to Neyland Stadium. People were wondering about recruiting and how much of this is about Nico and being able to get that and what that adds to, John. So you're right, we have been down this road before. So I would say cautiously optimistic.
All right, you're sitting at the table. You're putting some chips in, or are you sitting there going, no, I've been here before? Or do you slide a few in?
Well, are the blue ones the lower dollar amount? I'm putting the blue ones in.
Okay, all right, putting the lower dollars in there. Where are you guys on the momentum? Does this feel different to you than what you saw of those previous guys? Or I'm burned by those previous guys, and I'm not willing to go out and say anything yet.
Well, that's why it feels similar in terms of the day-to-day conversation and fan excitement and the social media aspect. I say that, like, go back to the 2014-15 range. Tennessee's recruiting at a really high level, signing top 5, top 10 classes then. And you have a lot of social media buzz, the brick by brick time when people liked it. And you had Khalil McKenzie with the bucket hat, and he's committing and he's talking trash to Hugh Freeze about stealing Drew Richmond away. So you've gone through this kind of run before. I'm buying it a little bit more because I'm a little more confident in what the offense is and where football is headed and what they can do. Does that lead to championships, though? I think you still have to be cautious in that conversation.
I'll give you one reason for caution, not to just put a rain cloud over this too much, but I think the fact that Georgia is what it is now, and that was not the case the last time. You know, the SEC East was pretty wide open in 2015 and 2016. That's a different obstacle this time. So are you getting back to a championship level? I think that takes a little more work this time around. But am I buying that this program is at least on the right track? I'm starting to believe that. I think they've got enough things going in the right direction. Frankly, I think NIL is one of those things that's an advantage for Tennessee in general. I've said this before, but I think Tennessee having that at its back gives it a little more chance of sustaining what it's starting to build in recruiting. So that, to me, long term gives them a better outlook. But am I buying that they're ready to challenge Georgia for a championship in a couple years? Let's wait and see about that.
Yeah, I'm just talking about the overall things are going to keep progressing in the right direction. And I feel more. I feel that this momentum is more sustainable, and Josh kind of touched on it, because of Heupel's background, and we know. I think the floor is lower with his offensive system. Now, in typical UT fashion, if they change the rules to where suddenly that's not a great advantage, where now we're going to give the defense as much time as the offense to change out, we're going to slow things down, your offense, that would be Tennessee's luck, and that might change my view. But right now, all things being equal, things don't change. I think his offense puts you at a higher floor, and if your floor is at a higher place, that means the wobble room, well, an up wobble takes you to a higher place. So I do think this is more sustainable than some of the momentum that people have bought into, that I've bought into in the past. I mean, I didn't buy into Pruitt. I didn't buy into Dooley. I bought into the Butch Jones. You win 11 straight games and beat Florida and Georgia, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. And kudos to those people who said, nah, I'm still out. I'm sorry. If you win 11 straight, I'll give a coach the benefit of the doubt at that point. But I feel this is more sustainable long term.
I think it's more sustainable too, because having been around all these guys, I think Josh Heupel has the best sense of how to be CEO at a place like Tennessee of all these guys. I think Butch Jones showed some signs of having it. We saw some cracks in that a year or two later. Right. Josh Heupel so far hasn't shown any signs of looking like a guy who can't handle being in the fishbowl that is a place like Tennessee. So I think he is the best CEO head coach they've had during that stretch, and that gives you a lot of optimism.
That's a great point. He hasn't been in the frying pan yet, though.
True.
That's a question that remains.
Yeah. Right. We didn't know about Butch Jones cratering. I mean, you talk to people who were over there. His whole personality changed when the pressure went up. Mm-hmm. It changed him as a human being.
We ran out of cliches, didn't we?
He didn't react well to pressure.
But remember the quote.
We don't know about Heupel yet.
Right.
Remember the quote about Butch? He's not comfortable in his own skin. That didn't sound good. And then you talk about Pruitt. He'd never been a head coach before. How's he going to be? And Heupel at least had that he had it at Central Florida. And he had it at some places where you can see he's stepping in. And you like a lot of things he's doing, but who are they going to stop on defense? That's what I'm tapping the brakes on.
Okay. All right. Very good. When we come back, will Tennessee's momentum that we feel is a little more sustainable, will that carry over to the NFL draft? The Vols have 4 guys that are hoping to get drafted. We'll tell you where everyone's projecting them to go. The draft starts on Thursday, and then it's Friday, and then it's Saturday. But we'll run through that next. We've still got a lot on recruiting. We got Tennessee getting a basketball transfer. We've got just how NIL is impacting basketball and older basketball coaches. And, like I say, we'll go live to Gainesville for some baseball talk. Packed show. Come on back on the Sports Source.